All right, Patrick, let's dive into interest rates because this is the number one topic. It's on everybody's mind, whether you're a homeowner, you're an investor, it doesn't matter what you're up to. You might even not even be in real estate, but interest rates are at the top of your mind because interest rates are high and people are on their tippy toes, edge of their seats, waiting for interest rates to come down. Is it going to happen? That's what we're going to find out because Canada right now, it's just been revealed. It's been like this actually for quite some time. We have the most restrictive policy interest rates of like Europe, UK, US. Canada's the worst. I mean, I don't understand how we keep being the worst.
Well, our good friend Carl Gomez has been on our stage many times, a chief economist, a head economist. He really pays attention to this stuff. He's saying Canada is definitely lagging. And actually, to keep up with what other countries are doing, we would need to drop rates of 300 basis points. In the meantime, as June 5th approaches, we're still trying to even figure out if we're going to get any kind of a decrease. Markets are saying 50-50, 60-40, 70-30. I'm still on the page of going, I don't think we're going to get a rate decrease in June, and more likely, we might not get much of a rate decrease in 2024, JG.
Patrick, I have never hoped more that you're wrong because I'm also waiting for that interest rate
Oh,
decrease. And I got to tell you, I'm gonna say right now, Patrick, that I'm gonna tell you they're gonna decrease June 15th. I'm only saying that because I'm kind of manifesting
yeah.
that they're gonna decrease. That's what I'm hoping for. But I
Oh,
will tell you this, and you'll see from the stats that we share in today's episode of Rated In, they are hanging on for dear life, the Bank of Canada, and they are waiting till the last possible moment. And I don't think we've seen enough pain yet. I think there needs to be more pain for them to decrease interest rates. Of course, they always do too little too soon and too much too late. And I think that's what's going to happen. I unfortunately think they're not going to cut interest rates, but man, I hope they do. I hope they do.
me too. I really hope they do.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 40 of Rein It In. And good news, now that your podcast, Patrick, is off the charts, maybe this show is going to be off the charts because we're now 40 episodes in. And I don't think your podcast really took off till post episode 40. So I'm thinking this is the one that's going to have liftoff for us.
I'm hoping. My fingers are crossed. This is the one. It'll take us to the next level. Hey, folks, just a reminder that we need those notifications turned on. We need those views, those subscriptions. We want to get these algorithms cranked up. We need your support. So make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe, hit that little bell for notifications. And by the way, when you do all that, it also drives content like this to you. It's not just about our show. So make sure you like, subscribe, make sure you make some comments.
Well, Patrick, we have 6 very, very good sticky notes today. I'm really pumped about these because they're quite like meat and potatoes. You know, I love the meat and potatoes topics. So, we're going to talk interest rates, which we've already talked a little bit about, but we're going to dig into it even more. We're going to talk mortgage renewal risks. My God, there's so much risk on the horizon with these mortgage renewals. We're going to dig in. We got some great charts for that. We're going to talk about work from home and how that's changing and continually changing the real estate landscape. We're going to talk about a whole new concept. Well, it's got a new kind of wallpaper on it, if you will, called the self-funding house. But you and I have known about this. We've done this for years and years and years. A lot of people are just learning about this concept. So we're going to touch on the self-funding house. Then we're going to talk inflation. We're going to talk housing supply. We're into the meat and potatoes, Patrick. It's going to be a great show.
It's going to be a great show. A lot of topics to cover, but we're going to get through it.
Let's dive in. So we were just talking about interest rates, Patrick, and I think it's really interesting to see what's going to be happening with interest rates. I mean, June 15th cannot come soon enough from my perspective. I have my fingers, my toes, everything I can cross. I have it crossed for a mortgage decrease. It would be so amazing. And I think it would really, really help us in the real estate market if we did see a mortgage decrease. I'm not counting on it though. But I guess we got to really talk about whether or not this is a housing bubble or a debt bubble. We got some very interesting charts here in terms of the amount of national debt by type. The fact is that this interest rate risk, the longer this goes on, the bigger the risk gets from my perspective and from everyone's perspective. So it's curious to see where this is all going to go. Let's talk about whether or not this is a housing bubble or a debt bubble.
Well, it's such an interesting time, right? We've never seen anything like this, but we've got this huge debt bubble, both in the general public and the consumer, as well as our government has huge debt. So that was borrowing money at extremely low interest rates. Everybody was getting rich, pulling the future into the present because of cheap money, almost virtually zero interest when you really look at it in terms of real terms. The point is that now we have this huge amount of debt, and we've got this issue around the cost of housing, but also a lot of the cost of housing and the debt is driven by the housing. So interest rates, and then we're going to get into renewals. So is it a housing bubble or is it a debt bubble? And as we look at these numbers, the bigger issue is the debt bubble. And although that doesn't seem to make sense, it only is a debt bubble because of the interest rates and the I guess the percentage of it's a very high interest rate. So the debt becomes an issue because you have to be able to service that debt. So it is a debt bubble. And if they don't bring rates down, I think there's going to be some real pain over the next couple of years. They're already anticipating that. OSFI's talking about it. And so is it a housing bubble? I think that's a bit of a distraction in terminology. I think it really is a debt bubble on both the public side and the government side, although the Bank of Canada can just keep printing money, but that's a different issue.
Well, I think you really see it in this chart, which is just how much mortgage and HELOC debt there is compared to the other types of debt, credit card debt, auto loans, lines of credit. I mean, they're really inconsequential when you talk about there's over $2 trillion. That's trillion with a T, $2 trillion of mortgage and HELOC debt. It's really interesting, and this, as you mentioned, compounds, and the problem gets worse because in 2025, we're going to have just under 25% of mortgages renew, about 23%. And in 2026, there's going to be about 31% of mortgages renew. Combined, that's over 50% of mortgages that are going to renew in the next 2 years. And I'm curious, there's no doubt the Bank of Canada knows this. There's absolutely no doubt they're trying to walk that tightrope, and they're trying to figure out, they're going to, in my view, they're pushing this train as far down the track as they can in terms of not lowering interest rates, and they're going to wait just until the last possible minute. Now, I don't know if that's later in 2024. I don't know if it's the beginning of 2025, Patrick, but I could tell you that I know they're waiting, and because they know the same thing that you and I know, and the same thing that real estate investors watching this show know, and that is there's a ton of pent-up demand. There's an amazing amount of people that are just waiting to get back into the real estate game. They're waiting for interest rates to come down. And the minute they start bringing them down, you're going to start to see price appreciation go up again. And I think they're scared of that. They're trying to minimize that, especially because there's an election coming, and that the whole politics thing plays a big role in this stuff.
Let's get ready to rumble!
It does. And what's interesting about this, I think we have to look at the housing market. It's like this standalone, separate part of our economy that really is a huge part of our economy. Now, that part of it is actually slowing down. I mean, you don't have to look too far to see that generally, and of course, Alberta continues to be the exception to the rule, listings have gone up. Sales are at record lows in some areas and in some property types. And so they are, in fact, slowing the housing down a bit, but prices aren't off. So affordability hasn't had the impact that they're talking about. Yes, they're off peaks, but they're certainly not historic lows by any stretch of the imagination. And in some provinces, some cities, we've actually seen a slight tick up. The point of it is this, is that as these interest rates are impacting the other part of the economy, the other parts of the economy, the different sectors, and we're seeing business insolvencies skyrocket. We're seeing consumer debt take on, but we're also seeing consumers get behind in those payments. Credit card debt is at its highest level in many, many years. The point is this, is we've got this economy, JG, called housing, and then we've got the rest of the economy, which is what we're trying to grow, create some productivity. The point is this, is if they hold on to rates to slow down the housing and to maybe bring some of the pricing down in housing, by the way, then of course the impact is on the rest of the economy. And that is a lot of SMEs are struggling. We're seeing, again, those insolvencies and those bankruptcies go up. And there's a kind of an underlying kind of thing here that we have to actually shine a light on. We're seeing within the charts and within the data mortgage applications or mortgages in general from all banks across the board have dropped significantly. So there's two parts to this. Banks need to lend money to make money. That's a big part of their thing. So they're going, hold it, business is bad. Business is getting bad. So regardless of what OSFI's saying, the big banks are going,
this is not good. We need to lend money.
that's part one. Part two is, when you think about it, how much do you think, JG, do you want that the banks want housing prices to drop? Imagine that. Let's say housing prices come down 50%. Now you've got a bunch of house mortgages. You've got a number of mortgages that are underwater in terms of value. You've got borrowers who are underwater because of that. So you just increase your risk dramatically. Plus, a lot of people borrow money to buy different things, different investment things that impact the banks. All to say this, I don't know that the banks want the property values to come off that much. They don't.
Oh, they,
Maybe
they
the
certainly don't.
rest of
Listen,
the world does.
the only people that property values to, if you had that, you said the words 50% drop, which is just like, I mean, that's crazy. I mean, nothing's impossible, but that's pretty damn ludicrous if you ask me. I think what you're seeing there, Patrick, is who does that really serve? I mean, other than the politicians to be able to say, hey, listen, we've brought the price of housing down this much. Who else does it serve? You would think, okay, it serves the entrance into the market, but really it doesn't, because the fact is that you have to, that the entire market has to move up and has to continue to move in that upward direction in order to free up the entry level housing. And the only thing, and you and I will die on this hill, at least I certainly will, the only thing that will free up the market in order to do that is supply. Interest rates will not do it. The price of housing won't do it. You have to impact supply, and you have to get out of the way to let us build housing so that we can bring that entry price down through supply. That's the only way to fix this issue.
Well, it is. And what they have done on the non-permanent resident side of it, they, put it out there, and just, we can talk about it just briefly, which is to say, because I've talked about it in the past, is they've cut back on non-permanent resident. They're reducing the number of non-permanent residents coming into the country. Having said that, what they're doing in behind the scenes is still going to continue with the population growth, with that immigration growth. So nothing's going to change. And back to your point, JG, as much as rental housing and condo, like apartment style buildings are going up in that multifamily space, the single family detached, or those units that we would normally put basement suites in or ADUs in, additional dwelling units on, maybe on the property, or a suited unit, those units are decreasing in terms of the build. So we're losing supply, especially in that particular property type.
Yeah, it's time will tell how this goes. I can tell you right now, I was actually just on the phone with a municipality yesterday, one of our mutual clients, Patrick, trying to help them get this 2 4-plex development off the ground. And I got to tell you, this municipality, kind of Western Ontario, very, very open, willing to work with us. They want to get housing going, and it was a real breath of fresh air. Project manager and I were on the phone with them and just thought, my gosh, this is great. Like, they really want to help work with us and get this project out of the gate, which was refreshing. On the flip side, you have the city of Kawartha Lakes. I have to take them to the land tribunal. I got to sue the municipality to get something through that they should have rubber stamped, and it's all politics because of NIMBYism, and it's going to end up costing the community probably $50,000 of taxpayer money for absolutely nothing. And in the end, we're just fighting here. Why aren't we adding supply? Don't get me freaking started, Patrick. Don't get me started. I know Jamie, our producer, wants drama, but
don't get me started.
I hear you, brother. When it comes to bureaucracy and politics, my stand on that.
Now, here's a great chart on the number of mortgages that are facing renewal at higher rates. These are insured mortgages and uninsured mortgages. You can see in 2024, I mean, there's a whack load here, well over 1 million mortgages, and then another million in 2025 that are going to be facing. Definitely, it's the big wave in 2024, 2025 in terms of that are facing higher renewal rates. And how much are their payments going to go up? Good question. Here's a great chart that the Bank of Canada has published showing how much payments will go up. You're talking about payments going up 20%, 30%. In 2025, Patrick, payments could go up as much as 50%. In 2026, they could go up as much as 60%. Imagine that. You have a mortgage payment, which used to cost you whatever, $2,000 a month or $2,500 a month. It goes up by 60%. That goes from $2,500 to $4,000. That's a massive jump.
Well, let's continue to let's continue to connect the dots, JG, because here's the thing. When we see these payments go up, we just talked about it. Interest rates stay high. We're trying to slow down housing, but then it actually slows down the other sectors of the economy as people can't afford, becomes affordability. We have inflation. We have the cost of carrying a mortgage, for example. People can't get into the housing market, so affordability becomes an issue. The point of that is when we start to connect the dots, as these payments come up, there's going to be less money to spend into the other parts of the economy. So even though many will survive this increase, they're going to be cutting back on where else they spend the money. So when you start to connect the dots, it gets really messy. And we can see in the future, as we get into 2024, late 24, into 2025, we can see the economy slow down even more because people have less money to spend. And make no mistake, if people quit spending money, the economy is in fact going to slow down even further. GDP drops even more. So it really is a place where the Bank of Canada is between a rock and a hard place. They back themselves into a corner. It's going to be really interesting to see the decision they make, because the fallout, if they don't bring rates down, which I still don't think they're going to be in a hurry to do that, there's a big risk of overcorrecting and slowing this economy down and then trying to get it ramped up again. Man, oh man, it's going to get messy over the next couple of years.
You know it's going to happen. You know it's going to get messy. And in the mess comes chaos. In the chaos is incredible opportunity.
Yes.
That's the exciting part, for you and I. And for people that are in this game, you're going to have to solve a lot of problems. That's the bottom line.
Well, I think, and I want to just finish what I was saying is, to your point, that's where the opportunities live. At the end of the day, people still need a place to live. For investors who are committed to an outcome, who understand the risks of not having capital placed into stores of value, hard assets, this is an opportunity for you to get in the game, know that you've got property, you've got that hard asset, and you've got a lineup of tenants who are willing to rent that property from you because of the affordability on the other side, which is buying and higher interest rates.
Now, I got some good news on the next slide, ladies and gentlemen. Not this slide that I'm going to show right now, but the next one after that, which is, and Patrick, you talked about GDP, so it's a good time to show this particular data, which just came out from Stats Canada and the Federal Reserve. But you can see real GDP per capita, which is the GDP. So real GDP, in case people don't know, is a gross domestic product minus inflation. That's what real GDP is. They're taking inflation out of it, because if GDP is going up, say GDP's, I'll give you a good example, because a lot of people don't know this, Patrick, but if you have GDP that's grown by 2% and inflation is 2%, the real GDP is zero. And the reason is because really your growth is only inflation. You're only inflating your growth. So real GDP, and this chart, I think, says it all, Patrick. I mean, we have had negative real GDP since Q3 of 2022. No, sorry, Q1 of 2023. We have been constantly negative, negative, negative. This is not heading in the right direction, which is why I think here comes the good news, which is here's the 5-year Bank of Canada policy rate outlook. And you could see this is going to be going down. Today, the interest rate's at 5%. 1 year out, some are predicting 4%. 2 years out, 3.5%. 3 years out, just about 3%, 3 and 4 years out, 3%. Now, Patrick, I got to tell you, this report is a hell of a lot different than what, the charts you and I were showing only 3-4 months ago, when people thought we would be at 3% by the middle of this year, which, boy, that's been wrong.
Yeah, well, we talked about that a number of times, and it's why I still don't see a correction into 2024. If maybe a quarter point, I would doubt it. Maybe 0.5. I hope, I'm with you, JG. I hope they lower them. I just don't see it happening, though. Having said that, I want to point out one other thing, which is when you look as an investor, when you look at the data and you see future state, most people, the unsophisticated investors, are sitting on the sidelines waiting for the rates to come down, which, you know what's going to happen, JG? They're going to be chasing prices, because we know that what will ultimately happen when rates come down, the demand will tick up again, and then everybody will be chasing price. For sophisticated investors who see the future, yes, the next couple of years, rates are higher, but there's also some great deals out there, as you and I talked about literally in the last show. We talked to the RAIN community about it. There's some great deals out there. And if you as an investor can see that deal today, and yes, you're anticipating lower rates, but we know that rates are eventually going to have to come down, short of totally shutting this economy down, which I don't think is anybody's goal. There's a huge opportunity here, and don't let these interest rates today deter you from where we're going in the future and to actually stay ahead.
Patrick, I was saying this like 4 to 6 months ago, how and it's been 100% accurate, which is, if you, and I'm going to draw this, instead of showing you a chart, I'm going to draw this with my finger. I wish I had, like, some crayons. I would draw it out for people. But essentially, interest rates are essentially like a backwards U, meaning they're at the top of their curve and they're now going to be coming on the way down. That's interest rates, whereas prices are negatively correlated to that, which means as interest rates come down, pricing goes up. And you are right now at the peak of interest rate and the bottom of pricing, and that is about to start the reversing process. And Patrick, you're 100% right. You know that investors are going to chase this on the way up, and it's the 100% worst move to make, because you can't control the price, but you can control the interest rates, because you get to renew. There's quite a few levers you can play with your interest rates, but you certainly don't want to chase the price. That's never a good idea.
Well, I think we can't step over, a fundamental as well, JG, which is, for investors, it's harder. It's harder to get to the bank, and banks are not being as accommodating as they were in the past. But I always go back to this. Think about what that does for your financial future by going through the discomfort, getting that wheel going. Yes, it takes time to get that wheel moving and get that property under contract, get it rented out, do all the things that we need to do. But the long-term benefits still remain. And I would say, given what's happening economically, when I look at the global macro, we've talked about it ad nauseum. The point is that when we look at it, we need to get into hard assets, and real estate is the place to be, or a place to be.
Now, Patrick, let's move on to the second topic here, which is this is a cool chart about Canadian employees working from home for an employer outside of their province. And I find this quite fascinating. We have, like, in Ontario, for example, 26.5% of people working for an employer in a different province outside. Therefore, they're working from home. Same with Alberta, same with British Columbia. These numbers are quite staggering. And I wish that this chart showed the past. Like, I wish it would compare where we are today to 5 years ago and 10 years ago. It would be an interesting kind of trend to look at. But this gives you a real good idea. And if you think about this from a real estate investor's perspective, this has several ripple effects on the market. For example, we've seen the price of 3-bedroom apartments accelerate. We've seen the price of bigger units accelerate beyond the norm. And the reason for that is because more and more people continue to work from home, and they're shifting jobs. They're prices in secondary and tertiary markets, especially tertiary markets, places like Aurelia, places like Peterborough, places like Belleville. These are markets where typically, they don't appreciate as fast as others, the rental price, that is. Well, they're actually appreciating faster than everybody else, because people are moving there, renting there, and then they're working for the bigger employers either in another province or in a bigger center like Toronto, as an example.
Well, there's a couple things around that. We saw this and we talked about this over the years. We saw the trend. To your point, what does it compare to 5 years ago? Is significantly higher. That's anecdotally. I don't have any direct data to share that would support it, but we know that many. So, for example, a lot of people, for example, have moved into East Coast, whether it be Halifax, like Nova Scotia, and they're actually working in Toronto. That's where their business is. They're making Toronto wages, by the way. And I've seen this. I've actually had conversations with them where they're making Toronto level salaries, but they're living a East Coast cost lifestyle. So it's strategically, it's great. It works really well. And it's not like it's rampant, but it's significant compared to what it has been in the past.
Well, but the fact is, Patrick, is and Toronto is actually a really good example because Toronto is such a big center. And I said this to people when COVID first happened, and they said, "Oh,
Who's going to move to Peterborough from Toronto?"
And I said, well, listen, the answer is not very many people, but you have like 3 to 5 million people in the GTA. If only a fraction of a percent move to Peterborough, that moves Peterborough's market in a big way. And that's what's happening with the East Coast, because the East Coast is even much smaller markets. So the fact is that even if a small percentage of people are doing this, and these are not small percentages, Patrick, we're talking about 26.5% of Ontarians are working from home for an employer outside of their province. And I mean, it's not like 2%. This is big. And the numbers, like you said, pre-COVID, these numbers used to be, you remember, we used to publish these charts 3%, 5% work from home, 7% work from home. Now look at the numbers. And we called this, really early on as COVID. And we said it's going to have an impact on the real estate market. And now we're feeling it.
Well, for sure. And, something to point out here and just shine a light on, which is that these are people working from home at a job in another province. That doesn't include the number of people working from home who actually have a job in the province. So in other words, the work from home cohort continues to remain relatively strong comparatively to what it was years ago. And that, of course, has had an impact on the housing market, and it's going to continue to impact it. So, I mean, we've kind of probably hit the high water mark and it'll level out. People are going, well, people are going back to the office. No, they're not. That's not true. They have come to some resolution. But I mean, at the end of the day, some of these bigger corporations are now fighting with their staff to come into the office 2 or 3 days a week. And the staff are pushing back,
going, no, not doing it.
And so what do you do? It's a kind of a standoff.
Moving on to the next topic, Patrick, let's talk about this. This is an initiative that you're doing at the Real Estate Investment Network called the Self-Funding House. And I really like this because this is something that has been near and dear to my heart because I use this very strategy to get into real estate 12, 15 years ago. I still use this very strategy today in order to accelerate my portfolio. And it's a phenomenal strategy. And I really, this is something that I'm glad somebody is making this mainstream because this is a game changer when it comes to buying a house, when it comes to growing your wealth, when it comes to just investing in your own future. And a lot of people, for some reason, I want to talk about the reasons why, but there's quite a few people that resist this idea, and I'm not really sure why. So let's dig into it. Tell us a bit about this concept.
Well, this was a collaboration that I'm doing with the Self-Funding House. Derek Lobo has written 3 books on this particular topic and gets into great deal with it. I'm working with Rod Schulhauser, his partner, on this initiative. Here's the thing, JG, you and I and many who are listening to this as real estate investors, this is like,
okay, well, what's the big deal?
This is like, of course, this is what you're going to do. Buy a house, rent out the basement suite. It just makes sense to us as investors. The general public is not as, I guess, educated in that realm. So the whole point of the Self-Funding House coming together in collaboration with the Real Estate Investment Network is to get the general public educated on how to actually own a home in this market. Times have changed, JG. Now, it's interesting that Derek Lobo bought his first home 40 years ago. Well, guess what he did? He did this exact strategy. Now, 40 years later, he's rolling it out in a much bigger way. He's got developers on side. He's got banks on side. And what stops people from doing it, number one, is they don't think of it, but they have a JAG, JG, and you know this one. I don't want to be a landlord. It's all tenants and toilets. Yes. I don't want to have to deal with the fallout. And yes, that is lots of stories that can justify or qualify those statements, but the education is what sets us apart. We live on 5 acres, a beautiful home in the Fraser Valley of British Columbia. Guess what, JG? I have tenants because it just makes sense economically. So for those who think that,
oh, it's just the sophisticated investors, they don't need.
No, if you're buying a home, this is the way to get in this difficult market. Understand the Self-Funding House, which is really about having an ADU on within your property, and you go into it with that intention.
Patrick, this has been my motto since day one, and I'm very attached to this concept because, like I said, if it wasn't for this, I couldn't have got started either, right? Like, let's be clear, and I tell the story all the time. It's nothing new, but number one, I had to do a VTB to do my first real estate deal. Number two, I had to do the self-funding house concept in order to get the wheels spinning. Now, I did that for many, many years. And today, I built my dream home. A lot of people know recently. And guess what? Just like you, Patrick, I have 3 acres in the country, and I built an apartment within my dream home. Why? Because it makes sense, ladies and gentlemen. But Patrick, I'm forever grateful to my wife because she's allowed me to push this concept, and she's been, now she totally gets it. But if she was here on this show with us, I got to tell you, man, when we first got started and it was like, hey, we're going to have an apartment in our house, she was like, there's no friggin' way, there's no way I'm having someone else live in my house. I'm like, honey, they're not living in your house.
Ooh, that's interesting.
They're living in an apartment that's completely separate from our house. This is still our house. It's just they have their apartment. And at first she didn't get it, but I got to tell you, now she gets it. And she's like, I'm so glad we did that when we were so young and got started this way, because it just makes sense. But that's the thing people have a hard time against, Patrick, is they think this should be my house. It's still your house, but they don't look at it the right way. And just that subtle shift in perspective can be everything when it comes to the self-funding house. So even though I haven't read the book yet, Patrick, when we were talking to Schulhauser the other day, I like how they really, Rod and Derek, built in a lot of the mindset component to having this concept work, because this is much more about a mindset shift than anything else.
Well, we're going to put the link to the self-funding house. So if you see that, go to the link in the description below. You'll get your special edition of the RAIN PDF of the self-funding house. But I want to just shine a light on something here as well, JG. Let's just do a really high-level math. Average house in Canada, let's say it's 750,000. It doesn't matter what it actually is. Let's just say it's that $750,000 house. You would need to have a household income of $180,000 to accommodate and qualify for a mortgage on that particular house. So when you do the math and you add a ADU to it and you rent out the basement, I think it's $1,500, maybe $1,800 a month, which is not outrageous for a great basement suite. Guess what your income comes down to? Now you only need a household income of $114,000. Now you can extrapolate that all over the place. The point is this: self-funding house works. If you want to get into your first home, look at it, treat it like a business, be an investor mindset. And the one thing I want to add to it, JG, is this: most people who are going into their first home are looking at it and they'll use the term, you've heard it, this is my starter home. Well, what does that mean? Well, it implies right away that there's going to be another one. So treat this one like an investment as you work your way towards your next home, JG. So self-funding house is brilliant.
Well, I love it. I love it. I love that you brought in the starter home concept, because I got to tell you, dude, number one, I don't want to, well, you often tell people your age, but you're north of 65, right? Just barely, but you're north of 65. And the starter home concept was really, that was a baby boomer concept, in my opinion. I mean, that whole concept, that's gone, dude. That doesn't exist anymore. You don't hear that starter home. I know people nowadays, out of the gate, they want quartz countertops. They want hardwood floors. They want 3,000 square feet. I'm like, what the hell are you smoking, man? What are you on when that's your starter house? I said, whatever happened to buying like a small bungalow of 700 square feet, renovating the basement, renting the basement out, and that's your starter home? And then in 5 years, you buy another one and you move on. That concept is gone. The kids don't get that today. And I think they have to really look into this kind of, thinking in order to get back to reality, because to think you're going to start with a 3,000 square foot with quartz countertops and hardwood floors in a double car garage attached to the house, I mean, it's just ludicrous.
Well, there's a couple things. The good news around the self-funding house and why you want to pay attention to it, why you want to get that book, The Self-Funding House. There's another component to this, JG, and that is the self-funding house in alignment with the Real Estate Investment Network. We've got developers on side, if you will, who are actually going to build purpose-built homes that are designed to have that ADU as part of it, number one. Number two, a couple of the major banks have said, okay, you do that, we get this all put together, we will give you 100% rental offsets. So in other words, guess what? They're going to take, if you're getting $1,800 a month for your unit, they're going to take that $1,800 and add it to your income. So in other words, they're going to do the math, but they're giving you 100% rental offset Big deal. Self-funding house. You need to be part of it if you're interested in getting your starter home or getting your first home, whatever that conversation is for you.
Your financial future is in the balance. I highly recommend you read that book. Thanks, Patrick, for bringing that. Appreciate it. Okay, let's talk next about inflation. What's been happening with inflation, Patrick? As you can see, we've got a couple great charts here, but we've been on a precipitous decline when it comes to inflation, and things have definitely stabilized out. And we're now, if you exclude, now this is actually funny, and this is a classic Bank of Canada move, Statistics Canada. Let's publish the inflation numbers, but let's remove some stuff so it looks good. And right now, what they're publishing is headline inflation, removing mortgage interest costs are now below 2%, which is where they want to be. But should you really remove the interest costs? Because let me tell you, the interest costs are pretty significant right now.
Well, there's, headline inflation, core inflation. They make those numbers work the way they need to make them. At the end of the day, we know, and we can't negate the fact that the cost of rent is higher, the cost of food is higher, the cost of fuel is higher. Oh, all the things that we need to live are actually still higher. Having said all of that, when you look at the math and just compare apples to apples, if you take the interest rate cost, and this is what's interesting about it as well, JG, if you take the interest portion of the cost of CPI out of the equation, guess what? We're within their target. And so there is that push to the Bank of Canada going, listen, it's because of you that the inflation is higher than you say you want it. So as soon as you lower rates and that interest portion of CPI comes down, guess what? We are within the target. So there's lots of controversy, lots of discussion about what the Bank of Canada should do, what it's going to do. But there's a bigger picture there. All to say this is that inflation seemingly is a little under control for many aspects of what we live and what we do, but we're all paying bills. And when it comes to rent, mortgages, food, fuel, your point, you go for a burger and it's $15. I mean, it's crazy the cost of living. So as much as it's come down, you have to look at it and kind of take it with a grain of salt as far as I'm concerned.
But let's talk about that, Patrick. As inflation continues to come down, first of all, everyone needs to keep in mind that it doesn't mean the price of stuff is coming down. It just means the inflation isn't growing as fast as it once was, meaning the growth year to year is not quite as aggressive as it was, but it's still going up, number one. But listen, are we ever going to pay less than $14 for a burger ever again? Or is it going to be $20 in 3 years from now? I mean, do you see this stuff going down? I don't see this going down. I don't think I'm ever going to pay $8 for a burger like I used to 2 years ago.
Well, somebody did a recent comparison of McDonald's. So they compared fries, the Big Mac, and whatever two other products, which is their kind of their mainstream product. And it's like 50-60% increase in those mainstream products. Like I say, a set of fries was $1.25. Now it's $3.60. I don't know. I don't eat at McDonald's. I'm just going by memory of what they were pointing out. So if we look at McDonald's as a benchmark, which many people do, McDonald's used to be, and one of the reasons it was so popular is it was easier, or not easier, it was easier too, but it was less expensive to eat at McDonald's than it was to go to a grocery store and buy food. That has shifted. And now McDonald's is not an inexpensive place to go eat as it was in even the past couple of years.
But I mean, listen, those prices have gone up. The price of food at the grocery store has gone up as well, as we know. I mean, I had one of our project managers here came into the office the other day with a bag of grapes and said,
"How much do you think I paid for this?"
And I started laughing and I threw out the most asinine number I could think of, $16. And it had cost them $15 and like 50 cents or something crazy for a bag of grapes. And I'm like, wow, but I just don't see the question, Patrick. I think there's a lot of disinflation, and we should do a whole separate show on this, but I see a ton of disinflationary pressures on different parts of the business. Like what artificial intelligence has done has really put a lot of disinflation pressure on stuff. Technology does that in general. But man, I just don't see the price of some of this stuff going ever back down to what it used to be. There's no way that that it's going to continue. And I'm just fascinated by how it's all going to shake down in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I don't see it coming down either, JG. I think some aspects of it will. Of course, we know technology is getting far, far cheaper. There's a lot of things that are, but I don't think that given food and fuel and what's going on macro kind of geopolitical issues, I don't see the price of food or fuel coming down significantly. That's for sure.
Okay, to wrap up this show, Patrick, we're going to talk about housing supply. You know, I'm passionate about this. And in classic, phenomenal, good old government, process, they have, and in a several years ago, we are going to show the numbers right here. You can see it in this chart. A couple years ago, 2021, we started to see finally housing supply after years and years of it precipitously declining. I mean, 10 years of it declining. Hey, we started seeing a resurgence. And of course, they went and killed it all. The whole damn thing is out the window. We're now at all-time lows. Supply has fallen through the floor, and this is not good. This will never solve the housing crisis unless we can solve the housing supply.
Well, and then you look at the building permits. I mean, they're not, the building permits have dropped. So builders slash developers have dropped they can't make the math work. Ultimately, they can't make the math work. When you look at the cost that they have to pay out in taxes, provincial taxes, Ontario, depending on the development, they're taking like 30 or 35% that of the cost is in taxes alone. British Columbia is very similar. The point is that, and I'm going to go back from an investor point of view, JG. We know that what drives the cost of anything is demand. We use an extreme example. What's the cost of oxygen? Well, it's zero. Well, why is it zero? Well, because there's lots of it, even though the demand is high. Now, when we look at housing, okay, there's lots of condos, for example, in Toronto, parts of the GTA, and we're starting to see the condo market soften. That was kind of a high demand at one point and not enough supply. Now that's totally reversed. And what are we seeing? We're seeing the condo market get really flat. Sales are at record lows. Prices are coming off. Rents are coming down. That's strictly a supply versus demand issue. Now, here's the thing. We've talked about it several times. When you look at that detached unit, and I call it single family, but I'm not talking about single family. I'm just talking about detached, whether it's a duplex, triplex, it's detached. They're not building. And guess what? That supply is very, very minimal relative to the demand. So if I'm going to own an asset, I don't want to own oxygen, although I want to breathe it. I do want to own detached real estate because that is the supply versus the demand issue. As long as we've got lower supply, high demand, which is not going to go away, given our immigration, we're going to be doing well as real estate investors.
Patrick, we don't even have enough supply to meet the demand without the immigration. Then you put the immigration on top of it, it supercharges the demand, and we still haven't fixed the supply issue. So if there's any time, and I'm so glad that I've been investing in single family asset class for 15 years because it's an incredible place to be. But you can see the building permits here for single family just about at an all-time low. I mean, essentially 1984. Oddly enough, the year I was born, was the absolute lowest, and we're back to those kinds of numbers. And at one point in the middle, in the early 2000s, in terms of single family across the country, we were like 130,000 building permits. We're now down, Patrick, to 30,000. About 50,000. That is like we're a third of what we once have done before, and it's crazy. And this by the way is the same in British Columbia. It's the same in Ontario. It's the same in just about every province. It continues to go down this road. The one thing that is growing though, and you can see it's flattened out, is the condos have kind of flattened out. The rentals continue to grow. These are the big multifamily buildings, Patrick. But those single families, man, they're they're at all-time lows.
Well, there's something that we just want to go back. I want to shine a light on because I want to emphasize the need to put capital to work in a hard asset such as real estate. We can't, and I don't want to get into a big discussion about monetary policy, but one of the easiest ways for people to understand what's happened over the past 4+ years, really on steroids, is the amount of money printing, quote unquote, that went on, and realizing that if you look at the supply issue, all that cash, all those dollar bills, guess what? They flooded into the market. So the actual value of our dollars continue to diminish. And this is all to say that you've got to get that money parked into hard assets where the supply is limited, the demand is high. We've got a demand for money, but we've got an ever-ending supply. So the devaluation of currency, fiat currency, but in this case, Canadian dollars, is definitely something that we have to put to. That's why we need to put our money to work. And the other side of why, I want to just add one other thing here, JG, in this regard, which is one of the reasons I don't see interest rates coming down. That is the actual challenge that Canada will face. If they bring interest rates down, it's going to create a bigger spread between the Canadian dollar and the US dollar. That will be problematic as well. So again, it goes back to what we said. The Bank of Canada has really backed themselves into a corner. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't see them lowering rates, but this goes back, all of those things connecting the dots. That's all.
This is an interesting graphic, Patrick, that shows, and I think you take us through it, because I think it's fascinating how a lot of people, they make assumptions, they make guesses, they're kind of not sure. They think, in real estate, there's no doubt from the highs of February 2022, and I did sell one property on February 28th of 2022. I literally timed the top of the market. It's like impossible to do, but I knew we were close. I didn't know it happened to be that exact day, but we sold this property and did really, really, really well on it. As you can see, Patrick, from this particular chart, other than Calgary, every other market is down. But we're talking about down from the peak of peaks. Most places are down maybe 10%, maybe 12%, 15%, a couple, 20%. But for the most part, we are far from where we were in 2021, in 2020. We're still way elevated compared to those numbers in 2021, for example.
Well, the key here, I think, is that we have to understand that this makes for good headlines, to start with. Secondly, is that who's really impacted this? Most first-time home buyers, for example, or individuals who are buying a home during that period of time, buying a home during that time, really, it psychologically beats you up, but ultimately you're going to live in that home. You didn't buy it in 2022 with the intentions of selling it in 2024, unless circumstances means you have to sell it for whatever that reason might be. And there's always a reason to sell real estate. The point is, this pain is with those investors who bought in 2022, who were chasing the housing market, who had no intentions of taking possession of the property. They were speculating on real estate never going down or the circumstances never changing, and they got caught. And they don't qualify for the mortgage. They never intended to get a mortgage. This was all of the pre-construction, particularly in the condo market, that was really impactful. But those are who was really at the effect of all of these drops from the peaks. And that was the fact that many investors jumped into a very hot market with the intentions of getting out, but the music stopped. Now they're caught without a chair, and this is where the fallout is happening. For those who are buying homes during that time, does it really matter? No, I don't think so. They'll go through it, and you don't buy a home with the intention of living in it for only a couple of years. So this is, I think that part of it's a nothing burger. It really is about the investors.
Patrick, I laugh because the condo investors just seem to be making mistakes on top of mistakes. We warned them. For how many years did we warn them not to play the assignment game in Toronto or in the GTA? We warned them about that. Then the bulk of them, they got burnt doing that. So then what do? They go to Alberta, where they can buy cheap condos. And you've been warning people about not going to Alberta to buy cheap condos for years now, and they're about to get burnt doing that. It just seems like if you're a condo investor, you should really pay attention to this show. That's what I say.
Exactly.
Now, let's talk Calgary, Patrick. The only standout, and of course, it wouldn't be a Rain It In show if we didn't talk about Alberta. Of course, Mr. Alberta, I got to give you your moment here. But you can see the only city that is, not below the line, but is above the line is Calgary. So give us the update, Mr. Alberta, on what's happening in Calgary, and might as well talk about Edmonton.
Well, I think at the end of the day, we know that Alberta continues to be a strong economic market. We have affordability, people moving into the province. Alberta's got a good run ahead of it as in terms of real estate. It's definitely a bull market. Calgary's on fire in that regard. At one point, they were selling 110% of whatever was listed. Don't know how you do that, but anyways, that was what the charts are showing. They're down to 80 or 85%, I think, of listings that get sold. So they're turning real estate. Deals are getting done. There isn't really any place, you look at Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, Grand Prairie, those markets are all quite strong. Edmonton is an interesting beast because it historically follows Calgary. As you can see in this chart, it's almost a mirror image of Calgary. I think that game has changed. I remain very cautious about what's going on in Edmonton. And JG, at the RAIN meeting the other night, I was just surprised of how many people who live in Edmonton are not aware of the 15-minute city initiative. And so it was interesting that I brought it up at the meeting, and some of the veteran RAIN members who are going,
what the hell is Patrick talking about?
And they live in Edmonton. And now all of a sudden they're going,
okay, we got to get to this meeting. The city's having a meeting. It's talking about 15-minute city.
People have to understand that Edmonton is going on a different path. And I don't know what the impact is going to be. To be quite honest, I don't. I understand the concept of 15-minute city, breaking it into districts, the cost of driving your car outside of that district versus riding your bike or getting on public transit or walking. These are all things that we have to know about and consider as we're investing in a particular city. I don't know that it's going to be a positive impact on real estate. I quite frankly would think it might have a negative impact, but I don't know the answer to that question. We have to do some more research on it. Edmonton is creating huge infrastructure right now in terms of LRT, in terms of roadways. They're trying to make it bike lanes. So they're trying to make it much more, favorable to having that 15-minute concept where everything that you live, work is within 15 minutes of your home. So you're not driving a car. And every time you leave a district, you're going to pay a price for doing that. So these are all things that are on the table. It's been approved. It is moving forward. It isn't speculation. It's actually going to happen. So if you're investing in Edmonton, pay attention to what's going on there. Dig into 15-minute city. Understand it.
Sounds like we need to do a whole show, Patrick, just on 15-minute cities, because we certainly don't have time in this episode, but it'd be fascinating to dig into it. So we look forward to that. Patrick, I think today's been an absolutely awesome show. Episode 40, off the charts. Ladies and gentlemen, please like, subscribe, comment on topics that you like or topics you'd like us to talk about in the next episode of Rein It In. And thanks for tuning in. Patrick, great job.
Thanks, JG. And hey, everybody, make sure you go down in the description, get those links. There's lots of links to other things. Make sure you pay attention to that. Take advantage of it. If you like what you learned here, go to the description below and subscribe for our free Insiders newsletter, where you can also stay up to date for our upcoming events and our courses.